Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank the ranking member. Let me start by asking this question. Let me set the premise, perhaps first to Mr. Smith and Mr. Barras, and then Ms. Mayer and Ms. Zachariah. So a business makes a calculation. It determines probabilities, and it makes a decision about how it invests. In this case, invests in its data security based upon the probabilities of events happening. And so my question is, before the breaches occurred at initially Equifax and with both companies, before those breaches occurred, what did you expect? What did you say to your executive committee or to your board of directors? What's the probability of a breach occurring at our company? And then the follow-up question to that is, and what's that probability today? So you calculated what the probabilities were. You make investment decisions about how to invest in security. And what that probability is it any different today for an additional breach at either one of your companies than it was prior to the original breaches? Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Senator. I'd put it in a framework like this. We don't calculate the actual percentage probability. We've got a very comprehensive framework called Enterprise Risk Management. I'm sure you've heard of that, ERM. And for 10 years or so, we've always ranked data security as the most high-risk, high-probability risk we have as a company. If we had a cybersecurity event, it would be detrimental to the company. We don't calculate it, is it 50%, 60%, 10%, or 5%? But we have been. Does
that statement mean that you would expect a breach?
The probability of a breach
is
in a
high.
data, yes.
Okay. And is that calculation any different today, Mr. Barras, based upon the changes that you've made at the company? Is it still the same probability of a breach occurring today or tomorrow as it was prior to the earlier breaches?
Well, we believe that today we are better than we were at the time of the breach for one reason. This was a pivoting point in our industry. We had to, in our company essentially, you have to make significant investments. We'll continue to do so to make sure that it's better today and it will be better tomorrow.
So how much more money are you spending today to prevent a breach from happening than you were spending as a company prior to the earlier breach?
As a natural response to the incident, we're spending significant more money in that process.
Well, what percentage increase at your company has occurred as a result of what you learned from the breaches that have occurred in the past?
We're expecting to have a specific spike on the cost for the.
You spend 50% more today than you did before? Or
easily.
75, 100,
Yeah.
100, 200% more?
4 times more.
4 times more?
Yeah.
And as a result of spending 4 times more, would you say it's less likely today that a breach occurs at your company than the probability of it occurring before?
This is my understanding.
And what would be your reduction in that? What's the reduction in the probability?
I don't have a specific number because we have a series of actions taking place today. I can say today that we believe that it's better today than it was before.
Would it be better if you were spending, instead of 4 times more, 6 times more? Is the technology out there that you could acquire to prevent this from happening?
We are acquiring technology, new tools, to make sure that happens. We've been advised by specialists to make sure that we have a sequence of installing this technology. There's a timing to do it.
Would Yahoo answer this question in its circumstances?
We have at Yahoo one of the most valuable databases in the world just because of the sheer number of users that are contained therein. We describe this as an arms race. Hackers become ever more sophisticated, and we have to become sophisticated in turn.
So would you have predicted a breach before it occurred? Would you expect a breach? I assume the answer to that's no, or you would have been doing something more?
We did not calculate percentages and or predict a breach. I will say we took significant efforts and investment to increase our security, which included increasing the size of the team by a factor of 2. We did things like empowering our users to opt out of passwords and into something called Yahoo Account Key. We increased our encryption, constantly changing the types of encryption we used to thwart hackers. We introduced a bug bounty where outside developers, if they discovered a vulnerability, could report it, and we would reward them. We hired outside teams to attack us and tell us where our vulnerabilities were. We introduced machine learning to monitor our system and evolve with the hackers to ultimately identify when intrusions occurred. So we took extensive actions.
Let me turn to Ms. Zachariah. Is the probability of a breach less today at Yahoo than it was prior to your acquisition of the company?
So again, we don't calculate the probability of a breach, but what we do is what our
Let me ask the question differently then. Are customers more secure today than they were prior to the breach? Can a customer expect that it will have less expectation that their data is at risk than before the earlier breach?
What I can tell you, Senator, is that Verizon has always taken security very seriously, and we're bringing that same focus and that same intensity that we've always brought to protecting our customers and our network to any new acquisition, including Yahoo.
What seems to be missing to me, the assurance that as a customer, however we define customer, should have a sense that they're safer today than they were before, and I don't have any assurance from any of the response to my questions that that's the case, that we ought to be just as concerned today about a breach as prior to. And what I hear is that we're taking all these steps. Let me ask you this question. Do you believe that other companies in the similar business, the companies that have lots of data that would affect consumers if there was a breach, are they as vulnerable to breaches as your companies are and have been? This is not limited to Yahoo. It's not limited to Equifax. Every other company that's in the data business is just as vulnerable as you have been and are today.
I would point out that the list of efforts that I discussed earlier were our ongoing defenses. In addition, in response to the breach, we took significant steps, causing our users to reset their passwords, changing our encryption, changing the attack surface area of our systems, and the access that even internal employees had to those systems. So by all means, we did respond and change the level of protection
and therefore
that we're
today,
giving
as
to
a
the
customer
users.
of Yahoo's, I should feel how much better that my data is safe.
I think it's difficult to quantify, but there's no question that, in my mind, that the users are better protected today because these breaches were detected and remediated for.
Are you spending all the money necessary to increase that protection? Could they be safer if you did more, or are you doing everything you can do?
I am no longer with the company, but I would say that certainly during my tenure that was the case.
Ms. Zachariah?
Yeah, and the security, exactly right, I agree. The security teams at Verizon would tell you that their job is to defend against any and all attacker, and that's exactly what we're trying to do.
And the company provides them with the resources to accomplish that goal?
Absolutely.
Mr. Barros?
Same
Okay.
for us.
And final question is, do any of you disagree that the Federal Trade Commission has jurisdiction over your data breaches and has the ability to regulate and to penalize for faults, to prevent and then to penalize if there are breaches? You all agree that FTC is your regulator and has legal authority?
Unfortunately.
Did you say unfortunately?
And so that they make sure the regulatory perspective is in place.
Thank you. Ms. Zachariah?
Certainly for the Yahoo incident. I'm not trying, so on the telecom side of Verizon, that's a little bit of a complicated question, but for the Yahoo incident that we're here talking
I
about
understand the
today,
distinction.
absolutely.
Thank you very much. In the absence of the chairman, I recognize Senator Baldwin.